Hello everyone, I'm RV Micah and welcome to the show where for almost a year now I've been talking about video games on this channel. But for today, I'm going to talk about a new video game for a change, Marvel's Avengers. First announced in 2017 and released September 2020, Marvel's Avengers was co-developed by Square Enix and Crystal Dynamics. You know, the Tomb Raider guys. It's based on the Marvel comic series and movie franchise of the same name. I think some of you might have heard of it. I mean, Endgame is the highest grossing movie ever, after all. The idea of a game based on the Avengers was an exciting one, especially coming off the heels of Spider-Man for the PS4. And that game was a masterpiece. In fact, I know we're not here to review that game, but I just need to point out that that game is amazing and you should play it. It single-handedly justifies getting a PS4. If you don't have a PS4, buy one. If you can't afford one, steal one. If you get thrown in jail, break out. Now, the game was supposed to come out in May, but it got delayed until September because of the Right, I forgot. YouTube doesn't want me to say that word in my videos. Instead, we have this sort of code word known as these trying times. But back to the Avengers. A lot of that hype for the game began to really die off after a few revelations about the game. First, the live service model. The game was slated to be consistently updated with new content, new missions, new heroes, that sort of thing. And this sort of content is free, so you don't have to pay for more content, which is good, and it does extend the life of the game, but it also means that the game is guaranteed to be kinda bare bones at launch. Second, the visuals. The game looked fine when it was first officially shown off at E3 2019, but the character designs just felt off. All the heroes suffered from a severe case of couldn't get the celebrity's likeness disease. Rather than making them look like their comic counterparts, they instead decided to make all the heroes look like movie stunt doubles. Third, Spider-Man. Now, as part of the game's live service model, Spider-Man was slated to be one of the heroes added as a future character. Ignoring the fact that I don't really see Spider-Man as an Avenger, it's still pretty cool to have such an iconic hero in the game. The problem is that he was exclusive to the PS4 version. If you have any other version, you're just plain out of luck, and a lot of people weren't happy. And to those people, all I can say in response is, serves you right for buying an Xbox. But in spite of all of that, the game finally released and it was greeted with a hearty, overwhelming eh. The game got generally middling reviews, at least in part due to the many, many glitches, and it absolutely astounds me that some of these made it into the final cut.
Agreeable grunt.
Terrain disappearing, textures going crazy, uncontrollable character spasming. On one occasion, the robots in the tutorial just didn't move. I mean, seriously. As of this writing, they announced a new patch that's supposed to fix over 1,000 issues within the game. I mean, it's good that they're fixing the game's problems, but they should be ashamed to have released a game with that many issues in the first place. A rushed game is forever bad, blah blah Miyamoto quote, sure you're familiar. I didn't record it, but I had a frustrating experience during my fight with Abomination. You know how when you dodge, the game slows down to bullet time to emphasize how close it was? Well, I kid you not, during that fight, the game forgot to speed back up afterwards, meaning I was playing in slow motion until I managed another dodge. One thing I did record, however, was this. Shortly after Black Widow joined the team, I decided to do some side missions which shifted my control over to Miss Marvel. But I stayed as Miss Marvel when I returned to the helicarrier. It didn't switch me back to Black Widow. So not only was I not able to talk to Bruce Banner to advance the plot, but there were like 2 Miss Marvels running around. Luckily, the issue fixed itself when I restarted the game, but come on, this game really didn't want me to take a break from the main plot. The graphics are okay, I guess, but aren't quite up to par with, again, Spider-Man PS4. In my opinion, it sometimes looks more like a PS3 game, but maybe that's just me. The music is blech. I don't remember a single song from this game, and I honestly forgot the soundtrack was there half the time. Remember back in my Stranger's Wrath video when I talked about modern gaming trending more towards ambient in-the-background music? Really not a fan. But, you know, glitches aside, how does the game itself play? Well, it kind of feels like a mix between Spider-Man for the PS4 and Final Fantasy XV, except without all of the stuff that made those games fun. The game is divided up into missions where you have to fight waves of enemies as you make your way to the end. These are actually multiplayer for the most part, and you can have a party of other players join you, but there's really no harm in playing alone. These missions are surprisingly open-ended too, with extra gear stuffed away in every nook and cranny possible, and in general, they really reward exploration, which I can appreciate. A lot of this game is based around finding better gear, each of which has various perks and abilities that you'll basically ignore because of how little they actually affect combat. Like, there is almost no strategy to these fights. You can dodge, sure, but there are so many enemies attacking you all at once that you might as well not even bother. There's allegedly a counterattack move, but I've never gotten it to work outside of a tutorial. Really, it's just a button-mashing beat-em-up game with some interesting powers on display. And health power-ups are common enough that it really does feel like the game is just encouraging you to brute force everything. Still, I will admit some of these moves are satisfying to pull off. The Hulk's attacks are pretty fun, Miss Marvel's abilities are all creative, and Captain America's overall playstyle is really fluid. So if all you want is a slightly above average co-op action game with some Marvel heroes, look no further. But we're not here to talk about just the gameplay. Marvel's Avengers is more or less the closest thing we have to a playable MCU movie, so we're going to judge it on that criteria. How does it hold up as a Marvel story? Well, let's dive into the game and find out, and since the game is still new, if you want to play the game yourself and experience the story firsthand, you can consider this your spoiler warning. The story begins with our protagonist, Kamala Khan, flying to San Francisco for A-Day, a celebration of the Avengers. Kamala in particular is here for the fanfiction competition they're holding, which she's a finalist of.
Oh, could you imagine? And the winner for best fanfiction ever is Avengers versus the Evil Sewer Lizards by Kamala Khan, and the crowd goes wild.
Please, that's hardly Kamala's A-game. Whatever happened to that My Little Pony crossover fanfic she once wrote? I'm not making that up, that's a real fanfic she wrote in the comics, and I have the comic panels to prove it. Actually, if you'll permit me to gush for a moment, Kamala Khan, aka Miss Marvel, is probably Marvel's best character since Spider-Man. She's my favorite comic book superhero of all time, and one of my favorite characters in general. She has a fun power set, she's nerdy and adorable, and she's inspired to do good because of her religious beliefs, which is something I can really admire about a character. The Magnificent Miss Marvel is currently the only comic series I regularly read new issues of. It's not a stretch to say that she's the only real reason I bought this game. If it had just been the established movie heroes, I probably would have just passed on this game. And while I may have my issues with this game, I have to give it credit for adapting my favorite Avenger so incredibly faithfully. Her nerdiness, her empathy, her youthful energy, all of that's here. This game's probably going to be a lot of people's first exposure to Kamala, and for that, I'll forever be grateful. Getting back to the plot, Kamala explores the A-Day festivities, and as she does so, she comes face to face with everybody's favorite superhero team, the Averagers! Aluminum Guy, Thur, God of Thunder, Brown Recluse, Colonel State, just the one state mind you, not all of them, it's probably Kentucky or something, and lastly, Bruce Banner, whose design I actually quite like in this game. Seriously, why do these guys look so off? Why'd they try to make them look like the movie actors' stunt doubles? Thor in particular looks like one of those heroes you'd see in superhero satires who only care about superheroing for the PR. Kinda reminds me of another Hammer-themed superhero, in fact.
The hammer is my penis.
And Captain America. Poor Captain America got the worst of it. His design in this game is so bad, I legit thought he was Hawkeye when the first trailer was released. Why the heck does his superhero costume look like riot gear? I know I'm not the first person to make this joke, but I'm sorry, I just gotta.
What gives you the right? What's the difference between you and me?
I'm not wearing hockey pads.
It's also here where we first meet Tarleton and Monica, two scientists working on an alternative energy source called Terrigen. More on that later, but for now, it's time to settle in for a show as Tony hijacks the festivities as he is wont to do and presents this alternative energy source to the world, which is powering a new helicarrier design called the Chimera. A highly unstable, untested, never-before-seen form of energy being shown off publicly at a massive event? I don't see anything wrong with it. But shock of all shocks, something does go wrong as a band of mercenaries led by Avengers villain Taskmaster show up to do some damage. The Avengers leap into action and fight them off, but they start arguing when they find out that the terrorists are using Stark weaponry. Oh wow, villains getting a hold of Stark technology? I have never heard of that happening before outside of every Iron Man story ever. You'd think the Avengers would be used to this happening by now, considering it happens like every other week. All of this culminates in the Chimera malfunctioning, spreading a mist everywhere that gets inhaled by Kamala, and seeming to go down with Captain America on board. Oh wow, I sure do believe that Captain America's really dead. It's not like he's front and center on the box or anything. What follows is a 3-year time jump where we learn, through a news montage ripped wholesale from The Incredibles, that the Avengers have been forcefully disbanded and blamed for the incident, with Bruce Banner even testifying against them. People who have been exposed to the Terrigen Mist have developed superpowers, and Kamala is one of them, having developed stretchy shapeshifter powers. Tarleton, the scientist behind Terrigen, started his own company called AIM because he wants to succeed where the Avengers failed and solve the world's problems through science. Spoiler alert, he's the villain. Remember that, kids. Science is evil. In particular, he wants to cure these people who have been infected, who have been dubbed Inhumans. Hey Marvel, can I tell you a little secret? Nobody cares about the Inhumans. For those of you who haven't been a Marvel fan this past decade, the Inhumans are a group of people from the comics who had their DNA experimented on by aliens and dumped on the moon, where they started their own superhuman society. However, until recently, Marvel didn't have the movie rights to X-Men. Those were owned by Fox at the time. Because they couldn't have mutants in the movies, Marvel basically decided, we'll make our own X-Men, with Black Bolt, and hookers. What followed was an era where Marvel just refused to stop shoving Inhumans down our throats in a vain attempt to downplay and replace the X-Men, with events like House of M, where Scarlet Witch had a nervous breakdown and depowered like 98% of the world's mutant population, and Inhumanity, where the aforementioned Terrigen Mist blankets the Earth and awakens a ton of latent Inhumans, which is where Kamala got her powers in the comics. We also got the revelation that Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver were, in fact, not Magneto's kids, but actually Inhumans this whole time. Yeah, comic fans didn't take kindly to this at all, and I'm pretty sure they've been retconned back into his kids by now. And all this so the movies would have a substitute for the X-Men to shove into all their TV stuff, whether we liked it or not. And how did that work out for them? This game was clearly well into production during Marvel's Inhuman obsession. You'll also notice that for a lot of the game's plot, you could easily swap out Inhuman for Mutant, and not a whole lot would actually change. Anyway, we catch up with Kamala brute-forcing the password to Tony Stark's AIM accounts and, with the help of a hacker who goes by the name Tiny Dancer, uncovers video footage of Captain America seemingly being left to die by Tarleton in the incident that supposedly killed him. So she heads out into the city to look it over in her hideout, which isn't in a convenience store? Boo! 0 out of 10, most unfaithful adaptation ever. Anyway, she's told by Tiny Dancer to meet up with them at the Captain America Memorial in Hero Park, which, I don't know, feels kind of weird that the monument to the Avengers is in New Jersey as opposed to New York, but it would appear that AIM's drones have gotten there first. So alright, it's finally time to jump into action as Miss Marvel and show those robots what for! There's a stealth section. In a sewer. I hate stealth sections. I hate sewer levels. I can't think of a single person who likes either of those things. So whose bright idea was it to combine the two? Were they trying to make people hate this game? Seriously, whose decision was this? I just want to talk. It's a moot point anyway, as Kamala is captured by Tarleton and Monica, and Tarleton is having some complications from the events of A-Day.
Where are you people taking me?
Somewhere safe. Forgive me. I know I don't quite compare to my holographic counterpart, but it's a nice trick for the shareholders.
If you're a fan of the comics, you've already put together that Tarleton is transforming into the major Avengers villain, MODOK. More on MODOK later, but for the sake of convenience and because Tarleton is actually kind of hard to say, seriously, if you tried saying it 5 times fast, I'll be referring to him as MODOK from here on out. Anyway, they offer her the cure for her inhuman disease, and she honestly does consider it, but when MODOK lies about where he was on A-Day, she realizes he isn't on the up and up and bails, which finally allows Kamala to fight some of AIM's robots, and I hope you like these guys because they're the only enemies you're going to see through the entire game. That done, she catches a bus to the Utah desert in search of a base run by the Resistance, a group of Inhumans fighting against AIM's attempts to cure them. What she finds instead is the downed helicarrier from A-Day, Captain America's very own shield, and a very pissed off Hulk. Drop the shield, Kamala. Drop the shield. He's mad at you because you're taking the shield, Kamala. Drop the shield. Our hero, everyone, taking a dead man's belongings as souvenirs. Eventually, Bruce Banner takes back control and calms down. Like I said before, Bruce Banner's design in this game is actually pretty good in my opinion. He evokes Mark Ruffalo without being one-to-one, even having his same stuttering, constantly nervous demeanor. He also grew a beard in the intervening 3 years, which leads to the wonderful image of a bearded Hulk. But I also love what they did with Banner's character. Here, he's the first Avenger Kamala actually befriends post-A-Day, and he becomes something of a mentor figure for the girl, a role that in the comics was occupied by, of all people, Wolverine. Anyway, Kamala shows him the footage she found, and it takes some convincing, but Bruce agrees that Tony needs to see this. So, after a side quest where they find Jarvis on an old hard drive and then fight Abomination, also Nick Fury faked his death again, they decide to pay Tony a visit. And all things considered, Tony reacts to Bruce's presence pretty well.
Hey!
Of course, the plot seems to know where our heroes are at any given time, so AIM shows up with even more boring robots, this time controlled directly by MODOK. And it's actually here that I want to address two big problems I have with the game's story. My first problem is with the villains. Kind of. I'll get into this a bit later, but in my opinion, MODOK is actually a pretty decent antagonist. No, I'm talking about the other villains. To make another comparison with Spider-Man PS4, that game had an enormous rogues gallery from across Spidey's history. The Shocker, Doc Ock, Mr. Negative, Rhino, Electro, Vulture, Scorpion, all those guys. With the Avengers, you not only have a bunch of villains that fight the Avengers as a group, but you also have each individual member's own rogues gallery to draw from. So naturally, with this being the definitive Avengers game, we have such amazing villains as Abomination, that lady? Oh, Taskmaster shows up, but only for the tutorial, and he's never brought up again. Oh, Loki shows up, except he never drops his disguise, and you never fight him, and it's only for a side quest. The game really dropped the ball here. AIM can have dibs on the main plot, sure, but what about the other major Avengers villains? Whatever happened to Ultron, or Baron Zemo, or King the Conqueror, or even Thanos? But the lack of villains also means that since the enemies are all affiliated with AIM, it means that they always seem to know where the plot demands the characters go. And it gets really monotonous fighting the same robots and beekeepers over and over again. Second, the game is very oddly paced, and the events surrounding the Abomination fight are a good example. Like here, Kamala sees the laboratory where the Inhumans are being tortured and experimented on and has this reaction.
Hulk, I need you to destroy this lab. Smash!
This could have been a powerful moment if it weren't for the fact that it's only after this scene that we discover the full extent of what the quote-unquote cure does to Inhumans. It kills them, by the way. It feels like these scenes were put out of order. But then there's the overall pacing of the whole thing, like Kamala and Bruce are in the S.H.I.E.L.D. warehouse grabbing Jarvis's hard drive, and immediately afterwards they're back on the Chimera with like no indication the location changed. Also, Bruce Banner seems to just spontaneously regrow his shirt when he turns back from the Hulk, presumably since the developers couldn't be bothered to make another model for shirtless Bruce Banner. And why not? They evidently couldn't be bothered to finish recording his lines.
Agreeable grunt.
Anyway, back to our regularly scheduled plot. After a pretty cool fight where you control Tony as he slowly reassembles a makeshift Iron Man suit from spare parts, you then spend the next hour or so reassembling the real thing in a series of missions that get old really fast. After all of this is over, Kamala decides to make a costume of her own, and the game keeps a detail from the comics that I absolutely love.
Oh, it's a burkini. My mom bought it for me. Muslim ladies like to wear it for sports and stuff.
Kamala's costume is literally made out of a swimsuit. That's just a fun little jab at superhero costume design that I always found kind of amusing. She and Tony then take that opportunity to bond, and there's something else I adore about her character, her ability to befriend seemingly everyone. Just pile that onto the endless list of reasons why I admire Kamala Khan so much. It's at this point that the aforementioned Resistance enters the picture, led by the one and only Hank Pym, who I'm honestly surprised they didn't try to make look like Michael Douglas. The team gets some supplies from him to get the helicarrier flying again, but after they learn about the Inhumans' plight, Kamala decides to stage an Inhuman prison break all on her own. It goes exactly as well as you think it does.
Okay, you know where my head here.
Luckily, she's saved by Black Widow, who's been working undercover at AIM this whole time and is the true identity of Tiny Dancer. It's here we learn MODOK's evil plan. His supposed cure, the Dark Terrigen, doesn't just kill Inhumans. It isolates their powers, replicates them, and allows him to implant them into specialized robots called Adaptoids, which MODOK is building an army out of so he can replace superheroes and, you guessed it, take over the world.
Of course!
One boss fight against the exosuit from Alien later, and Monica is in custody. While she's being held for interrogation, the Avengers decide on their next move. AIM is premiering the new Adaptoid soon at a public event, and the Avengers plan on releasing all of those supposedly dead Inhumans into the festivities, thus exposing the true nature of MODOK's activities. Now, that's also something I never really got about the plot of this game. What exactly is AIM's relationship with the public? It's never clear. Like, think back to when Kamala was avoiding those robots looking for her. It seemed like AIM had instilled a police state with robots barging into people's houses, making random searches, and swarming the skies with drones. And yet, for the rest of the game, it seemed like AIM is seen by the public as just some philanthropic science company. But, to be fair, I probably shouldn't underestimate the amount of shady crap that a corporation can get away with. This is America, after all. Anyway, before they put their plan into action, MODOK's forces attack the helicarrier. The Avengers try to fight them off, but...
We're here live at the AIM experience in Manhattan, witnessing the return of the Avengers, but they appear to be attacking the city!
So, you flew the helicarrier to New York before you had all of the Inhumans ready to go. I think you may be weighing your bacon before you fry it, Avengers. Luckily, Thor shows up just in the nick of time to help out, and the gang is back together once again. Once the threat is dealt with, the whole team gathers to view the rest of the security footage Jarvis decrypted, and the truth of the incident is... well, watch. Of course, with the reveal Captain America blew up the reactor himself for reasons unknown, the team is at each other's throats once again, because there just wouldn't be an Avengers story if the team wasn't trying to kill each other. However, after an accidental phone call to her dad, Kamala finally has it in her to give a heroic speech that manages to get everyone back on the same page. Again, it's Kamala's empathy and sincerity that really winds up winning the day here, and I can't oversell just how much I think this game does her justice. She's just so great! Anyway, the team now needs to find the location of AIM's secret lab. Luckily, Monica let this detail slip during the interrogation.
Scour the earth. You will not scour the earth.
Scour the earth. That's it. Of course, the satellite. The satellite.
And because fictional villains are contractually obligated to hide Easter eggs in their dialogue, they deduce that AIM's lab is in actuality in the one place that hasn't yet been corrupted by capitalism.
Space!
So Iron Man flies up there in an admittedly really cool minigame. You infiltrate the satellite and reach the center only to find...
Surprise! But only if you're 4.
It turns out that the formula that Monica was using to keep MODOK alive was actually synthesized from Captain America's blood. After the obligatory joke about how Captain America keeps getting frozen, hardy har har, and thanks to some timely assistance from Thor, the duo finally returned to Earth, with Thor rejoining the team proper here. I would just like to point out that only now are Captain America and Thor fully playable. And it's right before the final mission. Yeah, that's some great game design right there. Have fun grinding equipment for the 2 characters you just got! Meanwhile, MODOK learns that he was basically Monica's lab rat thanks to her formula, and is absolutely livid that he has superpowers.
Just think of
You
all the...
infected me with his blood. It could have killed me. How could you make me one of them?
You've been psychically controlling machines this entire game, and only now you realize you have superpowers? I've heard of being drunk with power, but jeez. At this point, his transformation into MODOK is complete, and I gotta say, he looks absolutely terrifying. Due to his big-headed design, MODOK is one of those villains with a reputation for being kind of a joke, when in reality, nothing could be further from the truth. And it's here, near the end, when I feel like I can finally talk about MODOK in better depth. The thing is, MODOK has gone the entire game and committed all these atrocities in the name of eliminating superheroes because he believes superpowered beings are a threat to the world. And the thing is, he has every reason to believe that because he didn't actually cause the A-Day disaster, Monica did. She's the one who hired Taskmaster. And when he learns he's become the very thing he swore to destroy, he decides to abandon the whole PR bit, go full villain, and blanket the world in his dark Terrigen in order to kill every superpowered being on the planet, himself included. It's honestly kind of a shame MODOK hasn't appeared in the MCU yet, because if he did, it'd probably be very similar to his portrayal here. So it's time to bring the fight to MODOK as our heroes suit up in their new uniforms designed for just this occasion by Tony Stark. Because hey, that's what happened in Spider-Man PS4. Peter Parker built a new suit specifically to take on Doc Ock.
Well, Black Panther. Good to wait.
Hey, quick question. Is MODOK just patiently sitting there waiting for Tony to finish building all this custom gear? Unless Tony already had these designs in his closet this whole time, in which case, why didn't he break them out before? But whatever, it's time to take on this Krang wannabe head-to-head, first playing as Iron Man, then Captain America, and finally Black Widow, who actually gets to face him once his hover chair thing is compromised. By the way, of the 4 major villains in this game, Taskmaster, Abomination, Monica, and MODOK, Black Widow gets to fight 3 of them. Sure, why not? Let's hand the most exciting fights in the game to the Avenger with the most boring power set.
For his neutral special, he wields a gun.
It looks like MODOK is down for the count, but the fight is far from over.
What is that thing? Kree Sentry.
Sumima-sen? Okay, in all fairness, the existence of this thing was, in fact, foreshadowed by Cap saying there was something in the bay that was causing the Terrigen to go crazy, and that MODOK was trying to cover up. And I think most people know who the Kree are. They've seen Guardians of the Galaxy, after all. But here's the thing. I know from reading the comics that the Kree were the ones who created Terrigen in the first place, but nowhere in the game does it ever allude to the fact that, oh yeah, these superpowers were made by aliens, go figure. I initially thought that Kamala would be the Watson in this situation and all the others would explain it to her, but considering she's a fan of the conspicuously absent Captain Marvel, she's probably already familiar with Kree lore. It's just so tonally weird, too, to have this plot mostly be about mad science and robots and whatnot, and then suddenly throw an alien at us in the last half hour. And as the icing on the these should have been mutants cake, it looks more like a Sentinel than anything the Kree built. Once MODOK assumes direct control of the thing, Kamala finally overcomes her limits and embiggens herself to its size, fighting the giant monster hand-to-hand like a massive kaiju fight. Which basically boils down to a few quick-time events. I'd like to thank whoever started the trend of making games finales just a couple of boring button prompts for ruining modern video games. The fight ends with Kamala impaling the Sentry on a broken piece of the Golden Gate Bridge, sending MODOK careening into the ocean below. Did Kamala just kill a man? Anyway, the day is saved, the team's back together, AIM has been exposed for what they really are, and Kamala gets a ride home as well as a reunion with her father.
Hi.
You know you're grounded till you're 30, yes?
Yes.
Good. From now on, nothing but school. And your special field trips.
I actually really like how the game adheres to Kamala's parents knowing her secret identity. It was the status quo in the comics for a while, actually. You know, until her parents got their minds erased by aliens, but never mind that. Comic books, am I right? Blah blah blah, post-credits scene hinting at future content. I guess we're supposed to be intimidated by Monica or something? I don't know. So that was Marvel's Avengers, and in spite of the game's flaws, its many, many flaws, I think that the story, and especially the characters, actually kinda saves it. Don't get me wrong, the story is poorly paced and feels kinda derivative of the MCU, but what pulls it through are its strong characters. Kamala in particular is an incredibly likable protagonist with a compelling arc. The other Avengers are likable and characterized well, aside from Cap and Thor, who barely got any screen time. And MODOK is a pretty decent villain in his own right. If you're looking forward to the future content of this game, hey, more power to you. But its monotonous and imprecise combat kinda turns me off, along with the live service model and unbelievably buggy launch. I know they've fixed most of the bugs by now, but they have no excuse for releasing it in that state to begin with. All in all, Marvel's Avengers is a slightly above average game with glaring flaws, but a shining story with great characters to pull it through. It set out to be a playable MCU movie, and for better or for worse, I'd say it succeeded. So in the end, I'd say the game is flawed. 6 out of 10. Join me next time and... hey! It's almost October! That's the spooky month with monsters and ghosts and especially skeletons. All of which can be found underground, because next time, we're going to take a look at Undertale. See you then!